Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Ministry Shift. Uh, Today, we're going to be thinking about online worship, and we've got some wonderful people to be talking about that with. We've got Matthew Parker, Jim Trude, Helen Babby, and a new boy today, we've got Chris Thorpe. Chris, would you like to tell us a little bit about you and what you're up to?
Well, I'm based in Shifnal, Sheriff Hales and Tong, and we're doing a broadcast every week for all three churches, and that's been surprisingly well received, which has been great. And we've been exploring about how to get more people engaged with the service and involved in the service, because I think that's the big one about participation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
So carry on.
my week's turned round. So on Sunday, I write my service for next week. On Monday, I send it out to everybody and get them to record their bits of video. And then through the week, we gradually gather those back in to stitch them all together for the service.
Absolutely. So it's looking quite different. But what I want to ask us first of all is, what have we done in terms of worship since the lockdown? What have we done in terms of worshipping together with our communities? And Helen.
Okay. As it's kind of evolved over the time, the original intention was to sort of just provide sort of spiritual communion and put some videos into that. And then because we have quite a high population in the congregation from migrants, they kind of wanted to see, because of sort of isolation issues, I guess, and things like that. So then we started to do the vicar and just people in his house started to do communion on a live stream. And so we've kind of tried to sort of match the two together, so you could use the spiritual communion or with the live stream. One of the really good things about the live stream is that you can interact with each other at the time, and it's really funny because some of our congregation would play the drums and stuff, so when it gets to that point you'll have little icons with drums and things, and it's just really lovely. But it really has sort of bringing in sort of like the spiritual communion, and so it's like you've got the option of worshipping together, but you're holding on to that idea that worship is coming from yourself as well.
So that's really interesting. So is it a continuation of worship, or is it a little bit different? So in what ways do we think it's continuation?
For us, it's in many respects, it's the same kind of service as we run for our main service most Sundays, but it's been streamlined a bit. We don't have so much singing, and we don't have so much linking in between the different bits, perhaps. Of course, a big disappointment is some people aren't actually present who would normally be present because they're not internet able, but we are able to send out service sheets to them so they know what's happening, and they can telephone a local number and listen to the Bible readings and the sermon at the very least. The way we get people to interact is we broadcast live or premiere on YouTube, and then people can write comments underneath. And we also get people to post selfies on our Facebook page of them watching and engaging with the service.
Oh, that's really useful. Having people engaging with the service is fantastic. And I think that's something you were talking about, Chris.
Yeah, well, that wonderful thing of Premiere Live on Facebook, when you can be sitting there watching the comments coming in and greeting people like you would at the door sometimes. You can see each person joining and you just said, hi, how are you doing? And what I loved was people were sending in prayer requests. They were saying amen, alleluia. And those comments were just streaming in at one point. That was lovely, particularly on Easter Day. The amount of engagement was really high. But to be able to just go back to people and make a comment back to them was a freer thing than in the church. But Mary, the answer to your question is that for us, because we're quite a formal church, we're much more informal now, and we're not in robes, we're not parading around, we're not doing lots of formal things, but we're actually, I think, in a way, connecting with people in a more personal way and at a deeper level in some ways than we would be in a formal service in church.
That's really interesting. So what other sort of new things or different things are we experiencing?
I think from my point of view, Mary, I'm at the other end of this because you'll feel very sorry for me because I don't have a community for whom I have to produce services, which I'm rather glad of in some ways. The technology quite daunting, but I'm at the end, the consumer end of it really, rather than the person who's delivering it. And yeah, it is an interesting experience. I mean, it does feel strange. There's no getting away from it. It does feel odd sitting there in your front room. Maybe you can light a candle, but saying the response, it seems a bit awkward. I mean, what I did find helpful on a service I went to on Sunday was actually to have an order of service that was also kind of put up before, because that did help a little bit with the kind of joining in.
Yeah. Yeah, we've taken around orders of service in my parish to all the people that can't print them off, and people who even aren't able to join us on the Facebook Live are able to do that. So that's great. But it does feel like there's quite a lot of work going on into these live streaming services. Is that always possibly the best?
It's certainly it's certainly got a lot harder for us because we have live BSL sign language interpretation in church anyway, but now because we're pre-recording, we have to allow at least a day for that. So that's kind of like shifted everything further. I mean, like Chris was saying, we've now, our Tuesday is now our Sunday in effect. In fact, I did hear of one vicar who's now having Sunday as their day off.
Well, it makes sense. But I think you've got something to say about that.
Well, I was just going to say that I just want to put in a little bit of a plea for those who don't produce streamed Sunday services for various reasons, perhaps because many of their congregation, that wouldn't be the best way to engage with them, or they don't have the capacity to do it. And just to recognise that there's a load of good content out there, and it's perfectly possible to point people in the direction of all the various services that you can find just by Googling or going on a Dyson webpage, and not to feel guilty that you haven't produced your online stream service, because there are other ways of keeping in touch with people.
Absolutely. The Archbishop of Canterbury now has done a sort of a dialer service, hasn't he? So anybody from across the country could ring and listen to that.
Talking to Tim Carter at Wellington, he said all of his people are watching about 4 or 5 services every Sunday from here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah. In fact, I found that I've got people who wouldn't normally come to daily prayer who are joining me in my daily live stream of midday prayer because they just really want that reassurance, I think, in these times. It's a whole new world. So what informed our decision? So why did we decide to do Facebook Live, or I think yours go out on YouTube, Jim? Why are we choosing what we're choosing?
We already had a YouTube channel, although we hadn't used it, and so it was there. We had a pre-meeting before we went into lockdown, and the person who heads up communications in our church and a few other very technically capable people said that from their context, this would be the easiest way to do it, and to be able to maintain a kind of a sustainable service that goes on potentially into the future as well.
Yeah, that's sounding really good. I think that's probably all the questions that I have for everyone today. I'm a little bit uncertain about time, but I think, is there anything else anybody would like to add about particularly the changes and additions to online worship?
Something else we've done is we've actually got lots of different members of the congregation are now recording kind of like a thought for the day. And we're posting those every day, which is quite amazing. A whole variety of different people are involved, far more than would perhaps get up to the front and preach normally. And it's great because they're being viewed ever such a lot. And so we can see that the spiritual life of our congregation is actually, very healthy in many respects.
That's wonderful.
I found that I'm just putting a lot more time into the preparation of worship. Normally in church, when we're just running services in church, to a certain extent, one's, having to rely on a lot of stuff you got in the back pocket to put it out on the day. But actually, you can't do that online. You've got to be really well prepared. And I'm spending a lot longer preparing service, weaving everything together, making sure the themes flow throughout and the message is consistent. And I know that the guy that's doing all of the technical stuff, it takes him about 10 hours to edit the service together. So it's significantly more costly to produce the online service. But it is something I think we're going to continue doing afterwards, because the number of people that it is connecting with who wouldn't be coming to church.
Absolutely. And I think that is one of the things. It's really tough to get the level of filming that you might want if you're trying to do it on your own. If there are lots of people involved, it really helps. But I do wonder, do we think there's a difference? Obviously, there might be in quality, but what other differences might there be between pre-recorded and live? I know that every midday I've decided to go live rather than record, because it would probably take me about 4 hours to record a half an hour clip. But what other thoughts do you have? Jim, what do you think about the live versus...
I think the live one allows for more interaction in some respects, although perhaps it does depend on how capable you feel with the different technologies. I struggle with live things, as you'll probably notice from doing this. It's not my natural comfort zone, so perhaps that's why I've shied away from that a bit.
No, you're a star, Jim.
You're much more vulnerable, though, to the internet going slow or going down, which is what happened to us on a couple of occasions when we tried it live. And just more we had some technical disasters going live. So really, we decided that it was just safer, and you'd get a better product from doing it filmed.
One thing we found is that a lot of people actually may not watch it live, but then watch it later on in the day, perhaps when they would go to our evening service, or people will church hop and go to another church and then come and watch us. And so it's you're able to watch it when it's more convenient, perhaps. And I'm not sure if that's good or bad. That's very consumerist, but I'm not sure how that is going forward.
I was going to say, Matthew, as a participant or consumer.
Yeah. There is a kind of emotional attachment, isn't there? Because actually every Sunday normally we watch worship live. And, so there is something a bit strange to then feel that this thing had been maybe produced on Wednesday that you're watching now, because our natural instinct, I think, in terms of worship is to be there in the moment, present, and all doing this together. And so I think there is some kind of disjunction there potentially for the pre-recorded stuff, but I hear all the anxieties about going live and concerns.
Absolutely. I think we're coming to the end of our time now. So I'd like to say a huge thank you for all that you've said. I'm sure that this topic of online worship is actually quite huge, and I'm sure we'll revisit it. But thank you so much for watching this afternoon. Please do remember to click like, to share with your friends, and to comment on our feed. As we've talked about, I think it is great to be able to participate, so please do. And there's a special extra treat because on Wednesday this week we have another Fresh Expressions ministry shift. So thank you so much for joining us today.